The courtroom was silent, the kind of silence that makes every breath feel heavy. Remy Ma sat at the defense table, her face pale, eyes fixed on the witness stand as 50 Cent took his seat. Nobody expected him to show up, let alone testify. The tension was unbearable. Cameras weren't allowed inside, but reports from journalists described the scene as electric, with every word out of 50's mouth cutting deeper than anyone anticipated. As he adjusted his suit and leaned into the microphone, Remy's lawyer tried to object, but the judge allowed it. Then came the moment that changed everything. 50 Cent looked straight ahead, paused for a few seconds, and said two words that shattered Remy's defense completely. The reaction was instant. Gasps filled the room. Reporters rushed out to tweet what they'd just heard, and Remy's entire team went into panic mode. Remy's eyes filled with tears as her composure cracked for the first time since the trial began. Witnesses say she whispered something under her breath, clutching her hands tightly as if praying. When court adjourned, she stood up, then suddenly collapsed to the floor as marshals and medics rushed to her side. Outside, chaos erupted. Fans, critics, and even former allies couldn't believe what they'd just witnessed. How did it come to this? And why did 50 Cent, once her industry rival, become the one to destroy her case with just two words? Everything changed in that courtroom. And it's only the beginning. The courthouse was buzzing with tension long before Remy Ma even stepped through the door. The trial had become one of the most talked about cases in hip-hop history, not just because of the murder charge, but because of who was involved. The world watched as headlines screamed about betrayal, revenge, and the downfall of one of rap's most respected female MCs. Remy arrived that morning wearing a dark gray suit, her face expressionless, but her eyes revealing the weight of sleepless nights. Pap was nowhere to be seen. Sources close to the family said he couldn't handle watching her go through this anymore, especially after the new evidence surfaced. Cameras flashed as Remy entered the courtroom, ignoring the crowd shouting her name, some in support, others in disgust. Inside, the mood was grim. Her defense team huddled around her, whispering last-minute strategies. Across the aisle, the prosecution looked confident, their papers neatly stacked, their witnesses lined up. But what nobody expected was the bombshell the prosecutor had kept secret: a surprise witness who would change the course of the entire trial. When the judge entered and the trial resumed, murmurs ran through the courtroom as the prosecutor stood up and announced the state would like to call its next witness, Curtis Jackson, also known as 50 Cent. The air instantly shifted. Remy's head snapped up, her eyes wide in disbelief. You could feel the confusion ripple through the courtroom. Even the jury members exchanged glances. 50 Cent's name wasn't on the witness list. No one saw this coming. As 50 walked toward the stand, the sound of his shoes echoed like thunder. He was calm, confident, even slightly smug. He adjusted his jacket, took the oath, and looked straight at the judge. Remy couldn't take her eyes off him. These two had traded diss tracks and public shots before, but this was different. This was life and death. The defense immediately objected. Remy's lawyer stood and said, "Your Honor, this witness was not disclosed to the defense. We need time to prepare for this testimony." But the prosecutor countered that 50's testimony was related to new evidence. Kay admitted just days earlier, evidence allegedly connecting Remy to the planning of her son's retaliatory attack. The judge deliberated for a moment before finally saying, "Objection overruled. The witness will be allowed." You could almost hear Remy whisper, "Oh my God." As 50 Cent took his seat, the room went still. Every camera outside the courthouse was already rolling as word spread that 50 was about to testify against Remy Ma. Journalists packed the benches, reporters typing furiously. The prosecution began questioning him about his past connection to Remy and her family. At first, his answers were calm, calculated, but when asked whether he believed Remy had any knowledge of her son's actions, 50 leaned forward and said she knew. The words hit like a hammer. Remy flinched, shaking her head in disbelief. Her attorney jumped up again, shouting, "Objection! Speculation! But the judge allowed it, saying the witness may continue. The prosecutor asked, "Can you clarify what you mean by that?" 50 paused, stared right at Remy, and replied, "She told him." Gasps filled the courtroom. Reporters scrambled for their phones. Remy's face went pale as her lawyer demanded to strike the testimony from the record. But it was too late. The damage had been done. The judge called for order as the courtroom broke into chaos. Pap wasn't there, but Remy's sister, who had been quietly sitting in the back, burst into tears. Security had to escort her out after she shouted, "He's lying. He's lying on her." Remy sat frozen, her breathing shallow. Those 2 words, she told him, had just shifted the entire case. Everything her team had built around her defense collapsed in an instant. The prosecution's argument was that Remy had indirectly influenced her son's actions. And now, with 50's testimony, it suddenly sounded plausible. As the court recessed for lunch, Remy refused to stand. She just sat there, staring at the table, her mind somewhere far away. Her attorney leaned down, whispering, "We can fight this. Don't let them see you break." But the tears were already forming. Outside the courthouse, the scene was madness. News outlets ran breaking banners reading 50 Cent testifies against Remy Ma. Bloggers went live speculating about his motives, some saying he did it out of spite, others claiming it was revenge for old industry beef. Twitter exploded with theories. Did 50 just destroy Remy's case for clout? Back inside, Remy finally stood up, her knees trembling. As she walked out of the courtroom surrounded by marshals, reporters shouted questions at her. "Remy, do you think 50 lied under oath? Remy, is your defense falling apart?" She didn't answer a single one. In her holding area. She finally broke down. Her lawyer tried to reassure her that cross-examination would expose inconsistencies in 50's story. But Remy couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. Someone had orchestrated this, and she didn't know who to trust anymore. Later that night, news of 50's testimony dominated every outlet. Analysts called it the most shocking turn in a celebrity trial since Tory Lanez. Meanwhile, fans noticed that Pap still hadn't shown up or posted anything in her defense. The silence was deafening. As the day ended, Remy sat alone in her cell, whispering to herself, "He really said that." After everything, her faith, her family, and her future were crumbling, all because of 2 words that cut deeper than any diss track ever could. The next morning, court would resume, and 50 would face cross-examination, but the world already knew. This trial had changed forever. Part 2 begins the next morning, with dark clouds hanging over the courthouse as Remy Ma prepares to face another grueling day in court. The air is heavy with media frenzy. Camera crews line the streets, fans crowd the steps, and every major outlet is live streaming commentary about what happened the day before. The phrase "she told him" has gone viral, replayed in countless TikToks and debate shows dissecting every possible meaning behind 50 Cent's statement. Remy steps out of the transport van in handcuffs, wearing the same gray suit from yesterday, her eyes red but her expression stoic. She doesn't look at the cameras this time. Her lawyer walks beside her, murmuring, "Keep your composure. We're going to challenge his credibility today." But deep down, Remy knows it's not just about credibility anymore, it's about perception. Once the public decides you're guilty, it's almost impossible to change their minds. Inside the courtroom, the mood is tense. Pap still isn't there. The empty chair reserved for family sits as a painful reminder of how isolated she's become. Even some of her closest industry allies have gone silent online, avoiding public comment to protect their brands. The judge calls the court back into session, and 50 Cent returns to the witness stand. Remy's mouth falls open. "That's not real," she mutters. Her lawyer immediately objects, claiming the evidence wasn't verified. But the judge allows a short recess to review it. In the hallway, chaos erupts again. Pap's sister is seen on her phone yelling at someone. They set her up. Ain't no way that's her voice. Meanwhile, news outlets are already reporting that audio proof may exist, tying Remy to the incident. During the recess, Remy sits in a holding room, trembling, Her lawyer assures her they'll demand a forensic audio analysis, but Remy knows how this looks. "I've been in this game long enough," she says quietly. "The truth don't matter if the story's too good." When court resumes, the audio clip is played, a muffled voice that sounds eerily like Remy's saying, "If they hurt my son, I'm not sitting quiet." Gasps fill the courtroom. Her defense insists it's been edited, but the jury's faces say it all. Doubt has been planted. 50 Cent sits calmly, arms folded, watching Remy's reaction. It's almost as if he's studying her, not out of malice, but something colder, detachment. He doesn't flinch as her lawyer rips into him, trying to discredit his motives. But the damage is irreversible. During a break in proceedings, journalists crowd outside. One reporter says, "If this audio holds up, Remy Ma's defense is in serious jeopardy." Another adds, "50 Cent's testimony has completely turned this case upside down." Inside, Remy whispers to her lawyer, "He's doing this to destroy me, and nobody's stopping him." But her lawyer only shakes his head. There's no proof of fabrication yet. Everything now depends on discrediting the evidence before the jury deliberates. As court ends for the day, Remy is escorted out quietly, head down, while the prosecutor smiles in confidence. Outside, fans chant conflicting messages, some yelling, "Free Remy," while others shout, "She knew." That night, Remy lies awake in her cell, staring at the ceiling. The memory of 50's words plays over and over in her head, she told him. The audio clip echoes after it, blending into a nightmare she can't escape. Her hands tremble as she reaches for a photo of her son taped to the wall. "I was just trying to protect you," she whispers. "I never wanted this." Meanwhile, 50 Cent appears on a live interview, his first public comment since testifying. When asked why he came forward, he says simply, "I don't got no hate for Remy, but when it come to street stuff crossing into family, you gotta tell the truth. It's about accountability." The clip instantly trends. Half the internet praises him for keeping it real. The other half accuses him of clout chasing and betrayal. Hashtags like #FreeRemy and number 50 did hurterty trend simultaneously, dividing the hip-hop world. Back in the courtroom the next morning, the defense presents expert testimony suggesting the audio may have been manipulated. But the prosecution counters with timestamps and metadata that appear authentic. The judge listens patiently. But the jury looks conflicted. Then something unexpected happens. The court-martial hands a note to the judge. The judge reads it silently, frowns, and calls both attorneys to the bench. After a brief exchange, the judge announces there has been a new development. The court has received an anonymous message claiming that the recording was doctored. Whispers ripple through the room. Remy sits up straighter for the first time in days, her hope flickering back to life. The judge adjourns for the day, ordering a full investigation into the source of the audio file. Outside, reporters swarm again, bombarding Remy's team with questions. One shouts, "Remy, do you think 50 Cent planted the recording?" She doesn't respond, but the faint, defiant spark in her eyes returns. That night, Remy finally gets a call from Pap. His voice is quiet, almost broken. "I saw everything," he says. "I didn't know what to believe, but now I know they tried to bury you." Remy's voice cracks as she says, "They almost did." As the episode ends, a teaser for the next day's hearing shows 50 Cent returning to the stand one last time. This time, to answer questions about how he got that recording. The narrator's voice echoes over the clip. "The truth can set you free, or finish you completely." And for Remy Ma, the line between both has never been thinner. The courtroom was a battlefield of emotions. Cameras flashed, reporters whispered, and everyone's eyes were fixed on 50 Cent as he walked to the witness stand. Remy Ma sat motionless beside her lawyers, her hands trembling slightly under the table. For weeks, she had tried to keep her composure, but now, with 50 in the room, it was clear this wasn't just another testimony. This was personal. The tension between them had been brewing for years, buried under industry politics and public silence. But when 50 Cent cleared his throat and began to speak, his voice carried the kind of authority that made even the judge pause. He didn't start with anger or drama. He started with calm, steady truth. She knew, he said, his tone cutting through the courtroom like a blade. Those two words, she knew, sent a shockwave through the audience. Remy's head dropped instantly. The phrase echoed again and again in her mind, louder than the gasps that filled the room. Her defense team froze, their arguments falling apart before they could even begin. Everything they had built, every strategy, every plea for mercy shattered in an instant. The prosecution seized the moment, turning 50's statement into their final weapon. They replayed video evidence showing Remy outside the scene of the crime, her car engine running, her phone active. The timeline didn't lie. It painted a story she'd been fighting to erase. The tears she tried to hide now streamed down uncontrollably, and for the first time, she looked less like a rapper defending her name and more like a mother watching her world collapse. Outside the courthouse, fans and reporters speculated wildly. Some blamed 50 for betraying her, calling him cold-hearted. Others said he was just telling the truth, that Remy's silence all these years had cost more than her reputation. Inside, her husband, Papoose, stood with clenched fists, eyes burning with disbelief. He couldn't understand why 50 would go this far. During a short recess, Remy tried to speak to her lawyer, her voice breaking. He said those words like I meant for any of this to happen. Like I wanted my son to die. Her lawyer didn't respond. What could they say? Every move from this point forward was damage control. The judge had already made notes. The jury's faces were unreadable, but their expressions told the story. Sympathy was gone. As the session resumed, 50 Cent sat quietly, watching Remy avoid his gaze. There was no triumph in his eyes, just a deep sadness. Maybe he didn't want it to come to this. Maybe he was forced into that seat by the truth he couldn't run from. His testimony was brief, but devastating, painting Remy as someone who had known more than she let on. Someone who might have protected the wrong people out of fear or guilt when the defense tried to cross-examine him. 50 remained composed. He answered everything with precision. Every word tightened the noose around Remy's case. The defense's lead attorney tried to twist his statement, suggesting he was emotionally motivated. But 50's final line shut it all down. You can't protect someone forever if the truth keeps killing you, he said. That moment broke her completely. Remy collapsed in her seat, sobbing uncontrollably as the judge called for order. Cameras zoomed in, capturing the heartbreaking image that would dominate headlines worldwide. The woman once known for her strength and defiance was now trembling under the weight of her own decisions, or the perception of them. Outside, chaos erupted. Papoose stormed out of the courthouse, yelling at reporters to back off. Friends close to Remy said she hadn't eaten or slept properly in days leading up to the testimony, fearing what 50 might reveal. What no one expected was that 2 words would destroy everything she'd fought for: her freedom, her image, her peace. Later that night, social media exploded. Fans debated nonstop. Some said 50 had crossed a line, dragging a grieving mother into a war she didn't deserve. Others claimed he had every right to defend his name after being implicated in rumors that tied him to the case. One post went viral. 2 words from 50 Cent: just ended Remy Ma's legacy. Just ended Remy Ma's legacy. Inside her hotel room, Remy sat by the window, staring into the city lights. The silence was deafening. Every memory of her son came rushing back, his laughter, his music, the way he hugged her before leaving the house that day. And then the image of him lifeless, the news she couldn't process. The rage that led her into choices she couldn't undo when Papoose finally returned. His eyes were swollen from anger and tears. He sat beside her without speaking for a long time. The air between them was thick with grief and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me everything?" he finally whispered. Remy's voice cracked. "Because I thought I could protect us. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would go away." But it hadn't gone away. It had only grown into something monstrous. Now it was on national television, and the world was dissecting every moment of their pain. The next day, prosecutors announced they'd be reviewing 50 Cent's testimony for potential new charges. That meant Remy could be facing an even longer sentence if convicted. Papoose vowed to fight beside her. But the damage was already done. Industry insiders began pulling away and sponsors froze her contracts. Even her closest allies avoided speaking publicly. The woman who once stood as an icon of resilience was now branded as a tragic figure. Back at court as the judge prepared to close the session, 50 Cent looked at Remy one last time. There was a flicker of regret in his eyes. Maybe he never wanted to ruin her. Maybe he just wanted to clear his conscience. But now it was too late. The truth was out and there was no turning back. As Remy was escorted out, she stumbled, her body giving out under the emotional weight. The crowd gasped. Cameras rolled. It was a haunting image, a woman once celebrated for her strength, now collapsing in defeat as the world watched. And in that moment, became clear. This trial wasn't just about guilt or innocence anymore. It was about betrayal, grief, and the brutal reality that sometimes the truth doesn't set you free. It destroys everything you've ever loved. The fallout from 50 Cent's testimony has left the entire hip-hop world in shock. What started as a trial for justice has turned into a public unraveling of one of the culture's most respected figures. Remy Ma's collapse wasn't just physical. It was the moment every wall she built came crashing down. 2 words changed everything. And there's no escaping them now. The question everyone's asking is, can Remy recover from this? Or has her legacy been permanently scarred? With new evidence reportedly surfacing and prosecutors circling back after 50's testimony, the story is far from over. Rumors are spreading fast. Some say there's another witness ready to come forward, one who could either save Remy or seal her fate forever. Meanwhile, Papoose is said to be working behind the scenes, trying to protect his wife from further damage. But how do you defend someone when the world already believes the worst? This is no longer just a courtroom battle, it's a fight for reputation, love, and survival. Stay tuned because the next chapter in this story could flip everything upside down. One wrong move, one more confession, and the entire case could take a turn no one saw coming. Whatever happens next, one thing's for sure, the truth has only just begun to surface. And the world is watching every second.